Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Russian short crash course. Today, we'll be discussing some opinions about Poor Liza by Nikolai Karamzin, published in 1792.
During our research, we all were able to find secondary sources to see how other publishers' perspective and key points on the story, Poor Liza.
This short story is highly celebrated in Russian sentimentalism and is fascinating in many ways as it takes readers through an emotional and visual roller coaster as they watch Liza through her biggest heartbreak. The title in itself is in tune with the themes of the first bit of the background in the story. Poor Liza's father passed away, and she lost the man in her life who truly seemed industrious, courageous, and sober. While trying to find her way as a young adult, Liza herself is introduced as a young and beautiful girl who is a symbol of purity. Poor Liza is often considered as a foundational novel in Russian sentimentalism. This sentimentalism movement aspired to emphasize emotion and stimulate feelings for the reader. Russian sentimentalism focuses on the fragile and powerless characters that can resonate with a wider community, and Poor Liza demonstrates that quite well. Karamzin uses different literary techniques to invoke emotion in readers. His choice to give readers access to Liza's thoughts and feelings was innovative as he takes the earlier ideas of sentimentalism a step further. Earlier novels may describe actions and some emotions, but the thoughts and deeper emotional connection was often left out. And as Tegar notes in her analysis, Karamzin's approach was necessary as Liza's world quickly became deeply emotional and magnetic. Karamzin also uses nature as an extension of Liza's emotional and moral state. This technique mirrors the moral and cultural strains as her purity and innocence shifts. For example, the pond was used in the beginning as a reflection of Liza in her place in Russia's ideal beauty standards and sereneness. When she loses her virginity, the land darkens, representing her innocence being taken away in this same darkness. Innocence being taken away. This same darkness reappears when she displays feelings of betrayal and anguish after she's abandoned by Erast. This emotional mirroring is well-used technique that contributes to sentimentalism. Tegar's analysis reinforces and mentions how Karamzin's technique continuously makes direct contact with the reader to clearly define her emotions in a personal and social understanding. This choice by Karamzin shapes the reader's compassionate, emotional response by demonstrating the intentions and impact of sentimentalism in literature. Next, let's hear a little bit more about the psychological impacts of Poor Liza.
My topic takes more of a psychological approach, understanding how Karamzin uses literature devices to make the reader feel and imagine. During my research, I came across a journal of Sopkin's 2020 journal analysis takes a deep dive into the psychology behind the story. Sopkin argues that the power of Poor Liza doesn't just come from the plot, it comes from how the story is built to shape the reader's feelings. He says that when we read Poor Liza, we are not just watching a tragedy unfold. We're actually being guided through a series of emotional steps. Karamzin uses nature imagery, pacing, and dramatic scenes almost like tools that create empathy, sadness, even a sense of ritual mourning. For example, every time Liza and Ernest met at the pond, the mood shifts. The water becomes a mirror of their emotions. The peaceful setting makes their connection feel fragile and beautiful. Sopkin points out that this is no accident. These scenes trigger what he calls emotional cognition. Sopkin then gives more examples, such as the innocent girl, the tragic fall, the silent landscape that shares her sorrow. And with these examples and effects, we can see how the story Poor Liza can still show effects on a modern readers today. This perspective gives us readers an idea that literature doesn't just tell stories; it creates experiences. Sobkin helps us see why readers, past and present, feel such deep sympathy for Liza.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you completely. The emotional psychology is definitely the immediate layer, and it's what pulls the readers in. You feel Liza's sincerity and you feel her fear when her rat starts drifting away. And honestly, you can feel Rat's confusion too. Psychology, the whole story is built on emotional imbalance. But in my personal opinion, once you sit there with the emotional view, something else pops up. You start realizing the tragedy isn't only about emotion, it's also about values, choices, and the moral world these characters are living in. And that's where a whole new perspective opens up. Because underneath the psychology, Poor Liza is a really good story about moral order, about what happens when traditional values collide with personal desire. Liza isn't just emotionally pure, she represents moral purity, devotion to her mother, honesty, hard work, and humility. Her love is grounded in sincerity and commitment. She gives completely because she believes love should be virtuous. These are all very virtuous traits in itself. Eras, on the other hand, isn't just emotionally weak, he's morally weak. His decisions come from his self-interest and not responsibility. He enjoys Liza's affection, but he doesn't honor it. And in the world of old Russian values that Karamzin is drawn from, that's more than a personal flaw. It's a moral flaw. So when we shift from psychology to morality, the meaning of the story changes. Instead of asking, why did Liza feel this way? We start asking, what does the behavior say about the values of the society they live in? Liza's death isn't just emotional devastation. It symbolizes the collapse of traditional virtue. It warns what happened when moral promises, duty, honesty, and responsibility are broken. And the Ras isn't just a confused young man anymore. He becomes a symbol of moral decline, a warning of what happens when desire outruns one's consciousness. So yeah, the psychology reading helps us feel the tragedy, but the moral reading helps us understand the tragedy for real, in my opinion. Together, they show why Poor Liza became so influential in a story about emotion. Yes, it's also a story about values, but the ethical lines that once held communities together and what happens when those lines are crossed.